Be seated. Thank you, ma'am. Let's go ahead and set forth our appearances.
Your Honor, Will Kemp for plaintiff.
Teddy Parker, plaintiff, Your Honor.
Robert Egbert for plaintiff, Your Honor.
Dr. Federico for plaintiff. Brianna Clifford for plaintiff.
Eric Pepperman for plaintiff.
Good afternoon, Your Honor. Michael Esposito, Tyler Watson, Bradley Johnson, and Eric Freeman for the defendants.
All right, the jury finally got here. That's where I'm thinking about telling them 8:45.
Do it. We could start earlier, Your Honor. That would be
Doesn't need to be longer than that.
Come on, spread it.
But I think they run about 10 to 15 minutes late every time.
They might just be trying to get back at us for them having to wait while we're doing stuff in here.
Could be part of that, too. And nothing outside the presence, right?
Not from us.
Nothing for the defense, Your Honor.
Oh,
That's, I think that's a foregone conclusion.
how much longer?
That's the question. That's the question.
Okay.
That's right. I think we all agree on that one.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I hope you enjoyed your lunch. And we're going to continue on. And so does the party stipulate to the presence of the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
Your
Mr.
Honor,
Kemp,
call
sir.
Dr. Hutt. After you, ladies and gentlemen.
You do solemnly swear the testimony you are about to give in this action shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
May I have you state and spell your name for the record?
My name is Catherine Adams Hutt, Catherine. The last name is two words, Adams space Hutt.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and Dr. Hutt, can I call you Dr. Hutt for just convenience?
That is perfectly fine.
Okay, would you tell the jury what you have a degree in?
I have 3 degrees and some certifications. I graduated from Penn State University with a Bachelor's of Science in Food Science, a Master's from Michigan State University in Food Science and Human Nutrition, and a PhD from the University of Illinois in Food Science.
Okay.
Also, I'm a registered dietitian.
And what is food science?
Food science is the science of food systems. It's multidisciplinary, and I categorize it into 4 different areas: food safety, manufacturing, agricultural production, and then customer experience. And so it includes and covers disciplines like food chemistry, food microbiology, food toxicology, biochemistry, in terms of manufacturing, statistical process control, quality assurance, food engineering, agricultural systems, animal husbandry, plant science, and then in terms of customer experience, sensory evaluation. Those are the disciplines.
Okay. Have you worked for the United States government before?
I did. I worked for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
And what was your job title?
My job title included 3 different jobs. I worked in extension service for a period of time. I was assistant to the administrator, and then also assistant administrator of the agency. The agency has about 7,500 people in it at the time, and I was a number 3 top position.
Okay, and are you familiar with something called HACCP, H-A-C-P?
I am very much familiar with HACCP, yes.
Why so?
I had a role when I was in the federal government to actually work on the development of the tool, initiate and work on the development of the tool as a regulatory tool for covering food safety for meat and poultry products. It has since become the tool globally for making sure that food is safe around the world. So it's an industry standard as well as a regulatory program around the world.
Okay, and have you testified before the United States Congress?
I did 9 times in my role as Assistant Administrator of the Department of Agriculture, yes.
And was this with regards to food safety?
It was always with regards to food safety, yes.
What is the Grocery Manufacturers Association?
It's a trade association, it was a trade association in Washington DC, which was made up of the industry, and I worked for them for 2 years, managing committees on food safety as well as regulatory issues.
Okay, and have you worked for Campbell Soup?
I did. I was the director of next generation quality programs, quality systems for Campbell Soup. Worked in Campbell's for about 4 years and installed what we call, again, next generation quality programs that incorporated HACCP in 100 plants around the world.
100 Campbell Soup plants around the world.
100 Campbell Soup plants around the world, yes. They're a global company.
And what is ISO 9000?
ISO 9000, it stands for the International Standardization Organization. 9000 is the quality scheme. It is the blueprint, if you will, for quality systems, quality management systems. It's internationally based. They're based in Switzerland, but basically it's the same type of tool that is applied universally around the world for certifications for quality management. And when I was in the federal government, it was not, and actually when I was in the industry too, it wasn't a tool that the food industry used, but I was one of the catalysts to kind of bring it into the food industry. It was very big in the car industry. You might see trucks going down the road that says ISO 9002, and that is the quality management scheme. They're touting it because it's a very strong program.
Okay, and have you worked for Yummy Brands?
It's actually Yum Brands with an exclamation point.
Okay, I always get
yes,
that wrong. Okay.
It's a restaurant company that has KFC restaurants, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell. And I was in charge of restaurant safety, food safety in the restaurants, again globally, and also supplier quality for the global 3 concepts.
Okay, and have you worked for H.G. Heinz?
I have worked for H.J. Heinz also, yes, when they were Heinz. They are no longer, they've got incorporated, but I worked for them and I was the director of North America Quality, and that covered also food safety. They had about 30 plants, and we installed HACCP programs in those plants as well.
Okay, and they're the ketchup people?
They are the ketchup people, but not just ketchup. It's also other condiments, pickles, and beans, and soups, and also frozen foods.
And have you worked for Coors Brewing Company?
I was Chief Quality Officer for Coors Brewing Company, yes, making beer.
Okay, and how many plants did you supervise there?
They only had 3 in the U.S., and we actually, I was in charge of the U.S. quality, and then also worked with the European business as well, and they had a couple plants over there.
And have you worked for McDonald's?
I was Chief Quality Officer for McDonald's, in charge of food safety, as well as ultimately nutrition policy.
Okay, and were you the global chief quality officer for them?
Yes, I was Global Vice President for McDonald's.
And how many restaurants did you supervise?
Forgot the number, but I think it was about 14,000 around the world, and McDonald's is franchised in some of those restaurants, and some were company owned.
Okay. And did you do quality assurance at McDonald's?
I did quality assurance for the restaurants, which we installed HACCP programs also in the restaurants. But very importantly, my job was also in the supply chain part of the McDonald's Corporation. And so I was part of the supply chain which managed quality also for our suppliers. So the suppliers for meat, chicken McNuggets, French fries, potatoes, etc., were all part of our scheme.
Okay, in general, what is quality assurance?
Quality assurance is the operation of basically delivering whatever you target. So quality is about minimizing, it's about process control, but minimizing variation around a target, if you will. So we have a Bible, which is a specification. It declares what that product is, what its quality parameters are, what color, what size, what all the different parameters of that particular product. And so quality is the process of hitting that target every time with minimal variation around the target. Use for example, like a meatloaf. I make a meatloaf. Using a quality process, I'm going to make that meatloaf every time the same way. It's going to be the same shape, the same size, the same weight, the same ingredients, the same taste. It's going to be the same. And that's my job as a quality professional, to deliver that product as designed and also with minimal variation around the target.
Okay, and what is HACCP, H-A-A-C-P?
It's Hazard Analysis and Critical Control Point System. And it's, again, this logic sequence food safety tool, which was conceived actually in the 1970s, and was used by NASA in order to make sure that the foods that were going up as part of the space program were safe. We don't want astronauts getting sick in space. Foodborne illness is not a good idea in zero gravity. So we had a 3-step process at one point. I was involved, and actually, again, the chairman of some of the committees that generated the 7 steps that we now know as HACCP. And we used an international consensus of different experts around the world to do that. And we delivered the 7 steps of HACCP as they are today. And it is now the food safety tool for all the industry, standard industry practice. More importantly, it's now a regulatory tool for basically all foods around the world.
Okay, and you say you were on the committee that developed HACCP. Can you expand upon that?
Yes, I was chair of the working group that amalgamated international experts. It was through an organization called the Codex Alimentarius Commission, which is based in Rome. But the more important thing is that it has international experts available to us that some are federal employees, or I should say government employees, and some are others. And we came together and kind of looked at how we could define the most robust gold standard for food safety. And we took, again, the 3 steps of HACCP as it was then and developed it into the 7 steps, which it is today, and then built international consensus around that, and that went forward.
Okay, is this sort of a checklist kind of approach?
It's a checklist kind of approach, yes. It's built on standards, but every organization has to develop their own HACCP program because you have unique ingredients and you have unique processes and you have unique equipment. So you have to have a HACCP program for every food product, essentially. There can be some categories of food products, but every food product needs its own HACCP program.
And when you say every organization has to develop it, do you mean every manufacturer?
Every manufacturer has to have their own HACCP program. And again, this is now codified in regulations for meat and poultry through the USDA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and also through the Food and Drug Administration for non-meat and poultry containing products, the rest of the food system.
And did Campbell's Soup use HACCP?
Yes. We actually integrated it into an ISO 9000 format, and it was a food safety component of this quality management scheme. And holistically, that worked very, very well. And we installed that program, which we called Campbell's International Standard 9000, in 100 plants around the world.
And how about Yum Brands? Did they use HACCP?
You used it in the restaurants for our restaurant food safety program, which had checks and documentation. But we also used it with our suppliers. So we made sure our suppliers were also using HACCP because it is the best tool for ensuring food safety. It demands that you have a logic sequence in your head. You know what your hazards are, and you go through the process of looking at your ingredients, your potential hazards, identifying critical control points. Critical control points being the points at which you can eliminate a hazard or minimize its potential for harm. And then you have to add some critical limits. What are you going to do about that? You have monitoring, documented monitoring for what those critical limits are, frequency as well as execution to make sure that they're done. And you have corrective actions. You plan in advance. If something goes wrong, what am I going to do? And that's a corrective action. You have to have that planned in advance. And then there's verification that the program works and records that are declared that you keep.
Okay, and did Coors use HACCP?
Yes. We also used it, even though it's more simple, because beer is not as complex as some other food systems. But yes, we use HACCP in beer systems too.
Okay, McDonald's?
Yes, and McDonald's, again, like Yum Brands, is a restaurant business, and so we used it in the restaurants in order to ensure food safety. But most importantly, we also made all of our suppliers use HACCP programs as well, documented HACCP programs, again, for each product, not just categories, but basically for each product.
Okay, let's talk about what you've looked at in this case. All right. Have you looked at the Southern Nevada Health District reports?
Yes, I have.
FDA investigative report, CORE?
Yes.
And you've looked at documents produced by Real Water?
Yes.
Depositions by Real Water?
Yes.
And you've looked at the trial testimony that's been played of Patty Converse and Jeffrey Desitel
Yes.
and Marlowe?
Yes.
Okay. And then you've looked at some of the customer complaints we've seen? Well, you've looked at all the customer complaints, right?
I looked at a lot of complaints, yes.
And then you looked at also the NSF audits?
Yes.
Okay, so let's see. Shane, can you pull up the general opinions? Does this slide depict your 6 general opinions in this case?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shane, can we have that?
You're good.
I'm okay so far. Okay. All right, let's go through, are these your 6 pennies in the case, Doctor?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So let's go through them one at a time. One,
So the first one is that Real Water did not have a quality assurance program of leadership or leadership for their quality assurance program. They simply, and you want me to go into detail at each one?
no, let's just go through one at a time.
Okay. So
And two regulatory requirements. This is HACCP, what we're talking about, right?
HACCP and industry
Okay.
standards for food safety management.
Okay.
Yes.
3,
3 is their employee training program. They didn't have one,
okay.
and I'll
4,
be happy to belabor that. Deficiencies existed in their standard operating procedures. They had some for some of their operations, and again using quality management, ISO 9000 as a model for that, if you will. There are documented procedures, and standard operating procedures is part of the architecture for documentation, but we're using the standard operating procedures for training of people and to ensure consistency, and that's why they're very important. But I'll go into more detail later.
Okay, 5,
They did not have a food safety plan. This is industry standard. It's required to have a food safety plan. They did not have a complete food safety plan. They had a haphazard food safety plan.
okay, 6,
And the last one was consumer complaint management. Consumer complaints are very important tools for a quality professional because it's the feedback loop. We can't look at every product that goes out in the marketplace and say, is that what we designed? Is that safe? We have to really depend on customers to give us some feedback. And there's some flags that show us we got a problem or we don't have a problem in the customer complaint system, but we have to manage customer complaints in order to have that information.
okay, and let's start with 1.
Okay.
Why would a bottled water manufacturer need a quality assurance program?
Well, they're making water. You drink the water. It needs to be safe. They have to have tools in order to make sure that they're making safe water. It has to comply with the requirements and also be part of the industry standard. But the deal is you've got to have quality management in order to deliver that because that's the consistency. And leadership in your quality program says that somebody's accountable for making sure that those tools are in place, that people are using those tools in order to, again, deliver the targeted product, which was in this case Real Water, but to make sure that you're integrating safety as you go along.
Are there a category of employees called quality assurance directors?
Yes, they can be managers, they can be directors. Usually directors are higher level than a manager. There's also quality technicians, a lower level, if you will. There's different levels of hierarchy in a quality program, but every organization has to have people who are accountable and know they are accountable for food safety and for quality.
Okay, and that's the quality assurance director.
The quality assurance director, and again, the title is not important, but the accountability is extremely important.
Okay, and do you have any criticisms of the quality assurance director, if any, that Real Water had?
Well, in the time span that I've looked at Real Water between 2014 and 2020, essentially, they did not have quality directors. They had people who were given titles of quality directors. Some of those people, like Mr. Desotel, and his testimony, his deposition testimony, his trial testimony, said he didn't want that title because he wasn't trained, he wasn't prepared to take that title. He did not feel like he had the ability to do that, and so he actually did not want that title. But Real Water, gave him that title, and he said he wasn't prepared to do that. So that was, I think, inappropriate.
Okay, well, let's start with Patty Converse, all right?
Patty Converse, yes.
Okay, do you have any criticisms about Patty Converse's functioning as a quality control director?
Well, according to her own testimony, she was not prepared to be a quality control director. She was hired as a receptionist, and she was promoted within 6 weeks to the position of quality control director. And she was made accountable for the quality procedures at Real Water. In her testimony, both in deposition and trial testimony, she made it clear that she felt like she had no experience to do that. She was a receptionist. She did not have training in her background for food at all, and certainly not for quality management. And she was asked to do things for which she was not prepared, as in her role with Real Water.
Okay, and is that unusual in your experience to see a receptionist promoted to be a quality control director of a bottled water or a food processing plant?
Well, if they had the training in advance and they became a receptionist for some reason and then were advanced back into quality, that would be something. But in this case, it was not that at all. Ms. Converse did not have any training whatsoever in quality, and again, never worked in a food plant or food facility. She was simply a receptionist that had a title thrust upon her and did not know how to manage that, according to her own testimony.
And she admitted she wasn't qualified, correct?
Multiple times, yes.
Yep, okay. And how about Mr. Desitel?
Mr. Tessitel was a production manager, a floor supervisor, I believe he described his title. And again, he was told he was quality control director by Mr. Jones, and he rejected it again because he did not feel he had the training, he did not have the understanding of what he was responsible to do. He wasn't given resources in order to manage quality. He just was given a title, and he did not feel comfortable with that at all, according to his own testimony.
Okay, and why do you need a real quality control director rather than just giving someone a title?
Well, they have to know what the tools are of our profession, what we do as quality professionals, in order to ensure that consistency. And the consistency can be for quality, but you target that quality, or the consistency can be around food safety, and you're delivering safe foods. But we have tools. HACCP is one of those very important tools. We have training, very important. We have other control tools like statistical process control to measure and to minimize variation around your target. He had none of that training. Ms. Converse had none of that training. But they have to have knowledge of what they're supposed to do in order to be held accountable with credibility for quality management.
Okay, let's talk about your second opinion, which is general disregard with regards to HACCP, okay?
Yes.
Okay.
So they took a very ad hoc approach to a HACCP program. They did there's evidence of some type of hazard analysis evaluation. It's not comprehensive. I think the most important thing about Real Water is that they kept the most complex, chemically complex part of their operation secret. They kept it secret from their quality directors, who they titled quality directors. They kept it secret from everybody. So everyone who had the role of quality was excluded from the preparation of the concentrate. This is where, again, the hydrolysis occurred. Blaine Jones was the only person doing it, and he never allowed those people who were accountable for quality in this room that was dubbed secret. It was called secret by one quality control director, Tom Pham, and then no one was allowed in there in order to see what was going on, much less measure and monitor quality of the performance, which was preparing this hydrolyzed ionized water.
Okay, if you were supposed to be the quality assurance director of the plant, could you do your job right if you weren't even allowed in the room where they were making the concentrate?
Well, no, there's no way. And again, I highlight this because it was the most chemically complex part of the operation, part of the formulation for Real Water. They used the concentrate in every bottle, whether it was a 1 liter retail bottle or a 5-gallon jug. They used this concentrate. They made it very few times throughout the year, but no one was allowed into this room to see it except one person who was the owner of the business, or the president of the business, Blaine Jones. And that can't happen, because there are things that have to happen in order to consistently make that product. There were no documented work instructions. There was no documented procedure for making the concentrate. And so one person did it however he wanted to do, and it was a he, but however he wanted to do it at that time. And nobody oversaw it, nobody monitored it. But these are the tools of quality. So we did not allow quality to happen inside that room.
Okay, and have you looked at the FDA testing of the 3 concentrate samples?
Yes.
And they found extremely high levels of hydrazine in there, right?
They found hydrazine in the concentrate, yes.
Okay. Now, the third thing here is deficiencies in employee training. Can you explain that?
Well, they didn't have a training program. My experience with, again, Campbell Soup and H.J. Heinz, these are larger companies, but the essence of preparing a person to do a job for what you're asking them to do is the same, whether it's a small company or a large company. And so you have to train them. When I went to Campbell Soup Company and wanted to understand what ISO 9000 was, again, it wasn't being used by the food industry in the US, and so I went to Europe, actually, where it was being used, and took a 5-day course, 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night, coursework and role play to understand how to be a lead assessor for ISO 9000, how to audit ISO 9000 systems, also how to install them, create them and install them. So that's the type of training that we did. And then I gave that training, either a one-day course or a three-day course, to people who worked with me on my quality team to make sure they could understand it as well. But the moniker of quality is you don't ask anyone to do a job for which they're not prepared. And Real Water did not prepare their employees to do what they were asked to do. They didn't have work instructions. They didn't tell people how to do things. They didn't have standard operating procedures that they shared with their employees. And they simply did not have those tools for consistency. But training is really important, and they didn't have it. Blaine Jones described his training method as ad hoc. Jeffrey Desotel described it as off the cuff. That's not training.
Okay, and I think you're starting to bleed into this, but your fourth opinion is about the standard operating procedures or lack thereof.
Right, and standard operating procedures are, again, a vital tool to describe how something is done, and so you're able to do it consistently. And if you change the procedure, you change the standard operating procedure documentation. And that standard operating procedure then gets translated into work instructions for the people on the floor who are actually doing the job so that they can do it consistently as well. That didn't happen at Real Water. They can produce some documents that are titled standard operating procedures, but both Ms. Converse as well as Mr. Desotel testified that they weren't provided to them. They were quality directors. That was their title. They did not provide them these tools, these standard operating procedures, in order to utilize them for training.
Okay, and the fifth point is they had a deficient or non-existent food safety plan. Can you explain that to the jury?
Right. The food safety plan is really the documentation for HACCP, if you will. HACCP creates a food safety plan. This term also is a little bit broader because the food safety plan not only has to have the 7 steps of HACCP, but it also has to include what we call prerequisite programs, sanitation, pest control, food defense, things like that. But it all has to be in a comprehensive food safety plan. So as I said earlier, that you've got to have these critical control points. You identify based on a thorough hazard analysis. You look at all your ingredients, you look at your process, you start with a documented process flow, so you can see all the different steps in your process. And you identify what could possibly go wrong here. What is a hazard which would cause a food safety problem? How can your ingredients create hazards? How can your process, like a hydrolysis, create hazards? And then you have to document that, and then you translate that into identifying critical control points where you can stop that hazard from becoming a problem. What do you do about it? Your critical limits, your corrective actions, et cetera. All those are part of your food safety plan. And how you monitor, also very important, as part of that food safety plan.
Okay, and on the subject of food safety, did the FDA agree with you?
Yes, the FDA's first finding in
Shane,
their...
can I have that, please, for you? Just 1 second, Doctor. Let's put it up there for the jury to see.
May I step down, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Thank you.
Do you need a pointer? Okay, tell the jury what the FDA found.
So this is from their inspection in 2021. This is their finding. They wrote a 483 form. Which
Your Honor, I'm sorry, but I have to renew my objection. Can we approach?
Yeah, we can approach. That's what I was going to do. And thank you, gentlemen. I
you,
appreciate your assistance, because I just wanted to see the document.
Appreciate it, Your Honor.
Okay, Shane, can you move that up a little bit? Just give us the 1 through 9. Yeah, thank you. Okay, Doctor, go ahead.
So they identified, the FDA in their inspection identified that they did not have a written food safety plan. Again, this is,
Same thing you just said.
yes.
Okay, go ahead.
And this is their critical finding, if you will, the most important critical finding. They also evaluated that the hazard analysis did not identify a known or foreseeable risk. And again, that's the role of the hazard analysis. It's required. It's standard industry practice also. But the hazard analysis was missing the most, as I said, the chemically complex and most dangerous part of their operation, and that was the process of electrolysis in that concentrate room, the preparation of the concentrate. It was omitted from any documentation that Real Water had that they were showing to their quality directors and showing to anyone else. So they did not.
That's two. The
That's
FDA is number two.
So that's number two. The hazard analysis just simply did not include the most hazardous, potentially hazardous part of their operation.
The rocket fuel.
The rocket fuel, making hydrazine through titanium tubes, which are part of the electrolysis process. They also did not validate that process controls are adequate to control the hazard. Again, that's part of HACCP. That's the verification process, that they have to make sure that the process you design does what it's intended to do. They didn't do any of that. Didn't touch that. Didn't even try. They did not have process control monitoring records. They didn't have monitoring of the electrolysis process, of making the concentrate. They didn't have records of making their product. This is unheard of as a quality professional in the food industry for 35, 40 years. This is not how the industry operates. This is not standard industry practice.
Okay, these are the FDA's findings. These are consistent with your findings, but these are the FDA.
Yes, absolutely.
The 5.
Yes, and the FDA was finally able to see that concentrate operation, which no other auditor had seen either. So we'll talk about the NSF audits, but they had not seen that concentrate room either.
Okay, the
It
5.
was kept a secret. So 5, they did not maintain records at the plant pertaining to physical inspection of equipment used for treatment of product water, including the type and date of physical inspections of equipment, conditions found in performance and effectiveness of equipment, which means basically they were not maintaining records of anything, yes, but they also weren't doing calibrations and maintaining records of that for the titanium tubes. They were taking pH, acidity, measurements of acidity and alkalinity. Again, they're selling alkaline water, so they were taking lots of pH measurements. They didn't keep records of that. They didn't keep records of total solids. They didn't keep records, all the critical to quality parameters that were part of real water. They weren't keeping records of those. The FDA pointed that out.
Okay, let's not beat a dead horse. Let's just stop at 5, okay? Please take a check. Let's go back to your opinion. I think 6 was customer complaints. Shane, can we have that back up? Her opinion. Okay. So can you explain to the jury why you think there were deficiencies in the, well, first of all, why is it important? Why do you document complaints from your own customers?
Right, so I mentioned before, this is a very important tool to the quality scheme because it's a feedback. What goes out into the marketplace, this is what customers actually see. So they're giving you very valuable feedback. And you need to do something about it, particularly when you see 2 or more complaints about the same lot or the same production time period. And then that's a huge red flag that something is really wrong with the product. And you've got to figure out what the root cause of the problem is and fix it. Corrective actions, that's what the corrective action's for. But in the case of Real Water, they didn't have a consumer complaint management scheme. They had consumer complaints. They were receiving them, and basically they were being run through the sales part of the organization, not the quality part. The quality directors didn't even see the consumer complaints. They were restricted from that. So the salespeople were basically giving the customer who complained free water, and maybe going out in the field and picking up a bottle and smelling it, and if they didn't smell anything bad, well, everything's okay. Well, that's not the way the customer complaint management works. You can dismiss a complaint, but you've got to investigate it, and you've got to figure out, particularly when you see multiple similar complaints about the same lot or just about your product out there, you need to figure out what's going on. And in this case, there were multiple complaints, and nobody in the quality realm of the business was enabled to do anything about it. They didn't even get a chance to see them.
Okay, and is that unusual to have the salespeople be the persons that are responsible for customer complaints?
That is not standard practice. That is very unusual, yes.
Okay. Now, you've mentioned a couple times NSF.
Yes.
What is NSF?
NSF is an organization. They're based in Ann Arbor, Michigan. It's called the National Sanitation Foundation. And it's an audit organization. They do audits of food plants, but they also have expertise and specialty in bottled water and also equipment. So they certify equipment, and they do a lot of bottled water audits for the business and set up bottled water standards and do a lot of monitoring for pesticides and other compounds, organic compounds in water,
Okay,
potentially
did
in water.
NSF come to the Real Water plant?
NSF, in an auditing role, was asked to come to the real water plant. Basically, their audits are every year. There's a requirement for a bottled water audit. They have a set of standards for bottled water, and NSF goes in and audits according to those documented standards. So the company knows what they're going to be held accountable for. They've got the standard checklist already, so they just have to comply with those requirements.
And did Costco require NSF go in there as opposed to Real Water doing it on their own?
Right. The way this works in the food industry is a customer is going to ask their supplier, and we did this at McDonald's and Yum Brands, also asked of the manufacturer, I could be asking Heinz and Campbell Soup for that matter, they have to ask them for an annual audit. And we've streamlined the way that these audits are done, but they're using standards, if you will, standardized standards, recognized as food safety standards and quality management system standards. And now they're universally basically recognized around the world. So we tried to minimize the burden on the company of getting all these audits. So there's a gold standard audit, and basically NSF was applying that. But the customer, in this case Costco, required an annual audit of the bottled water facility, which was Real Water. So that's why they were going in.
Okay. And did you look at the March 2017 audit?
Yes,
And did you also look at the December 2018 audit?
yes,
And are they relevant to your opinion?
yes.
Why?
There were very big deficiencies in those two audits.
Okay, let's pull up the December 2018 audit, HACCP section.
If I may step down, Your Honor?
Sure.
Yes, you may, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, first of all, what's the date of this audit?
The date of this audit is right here, the 6th of December, 2018.
And it says Costco up there, what's that mean?
That means that's the customer who requested this audit. So Costco's not paying for it, Real Water's paying for it, but the auditor's going in, looking at information that is specific to Costco products.
And what happened in terms of, let's see. Yeah, can we see the HACCP section, please, Shane? And this says HACCP, that's what we've been talking about?
Right, there's 22 different elements in the standard, if you will. This is section 3 on HACCP. And again, this is a standard. So the standard is identified and the auditor's comments are identified in red.
So what's in black, that's the standard
Right, what is in
item.
black is the standard.
And red is
What's
what they
red.
found on this audit.
Right,
correct? Okay.
right.
All right, so how did Real Water do?
They didn't do very well. They did actually very, very poorly. They got a score of 6.7% compliance on this audit. And we'll go through, here's the number right here, 6.7 out of 100. I've never seen a score like that. In all my career, I've never seen a score that low, which basically meant to me they had total disregard for HACCP implementation at the Real Water facility.
So out of a possible 100 points, they got 6.7%.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
So if you can scroll up, perhaps I can identify the issues. Whoops. Up. Unless you want me to address GMPs.
Go ahead. Those no's, that means they didn't pass those?
That means they were not compliant with the standard that was given.
Okay, we back to HACCP.
Just keep, there you go. Okay, so I think this is really important because the HACCP team has to be identified, and the HACCP team is designed to be multidisciplinary. So you have somebody from operations, somebody from quality, somebody from management, and maybe somebody else, an engineer, if you will. But the idea is to bring different disciplines together, and they're the HACCP team, because they're looking for the problems, making sure the HACCP program is working. In this case, the HACCP team list, which is required, was not current, and there are 4 positions that are listed. 3 of them were managed by the same person, the VP of Operations, Blaine Jones. So then next, there's no current staff that has completed formal HACCP training. This is not nice to do, this is required. They have to go through a formal training course for HACCP, and no one in the facility had done that. And actually going back to 2014, they had this marked no on almost every audit that was done. They simply weren't taking it seriously. So then going on, is there a description of each product, including its intended use and list of ingredients and materials used to produce it? This is important for that specification. They didn't have it. They didn't have the specification for Real Water of any size. It was not available for the audit, which means it didn't exist. And then here, again, I started saying earlier, the most important thing you do is identify what you do in the process. You describe this documented process flow diagram. And here, the process flow diagram was not up to date, does not reflect all the process steps, and not include all the inputs such as ingredients added. And bear in mind, they didn't even know about Suite 145 where the concentrate was being made. So they're saying the process flow is not up to date, not complete, and a huge piece of the entire program, making that concentrate, was not available to them. They didn't know it existed.
Okay, now you've said this 6.7 score is the worst you've ever seen.
Yes,
How many of these audits have you looked at in your life?
I've done this for 35 years, 30, 40 years. I've been in, again, hundreds of plants. I've managed audits, I've received audits as a consultant. I've worked with companies receiving audits and helped them through that. I've looked at thousands of audits.
Okay. And this is the worst.
That's the worst. That
Okay.
means, no, they don't have it at all.
Shane, can I have my next slide, please? There was no qualified individual.
As long as I need to read this, I'm going to stay down here.
Can you see that one?
Yes.
Okay. Good. Now, this is item number 5. Could you read to the jury what that says?
Right, so this is in a different section. It's GMP and sanitation. This is on personal hygiene, plant, facility, sanitation. And the comment from the auditor, which I've never seen in any audit again, there was no qualified individual to provide a level of competency necessary for production of clean and safe product. Note that the QA director has resigned.
And what does that mean, that there's no one qualified to make a safe bottled water product?
That means they had no systems, they had no food safety tools in place, according to the auditor who looked at this whole process, and they were missing key parts of sanitation, they were missing key parts of production, they had no tools for consistency. They simply were ignoring industry standard practices that is across the board, HACCP notwithstanding. What we do in the industry to make safe product, they were ignoring it.
Okay, let's move over to customer complaints. Did you review? Go ahead, you can take your seat, please.
Yes, I reviewed customer complaints.
Okay, and did you see any real water complaints that were particularly of concern, alarming?
Well, yes, and particularly of alarm were two things. Number one, there was two complaints about one lot of product with a similar type of complaint, a gasoline type smell.
Shane, could I have my next slide?
A
up,
chemical
please?
type smell.
Now, you've looked at all the complaints, right? There's a lot of complaints.
There are a lot of complaints.
And you looked at the one from Mrs. Kessler that we played. I don't think we played her video yet. Yeah, we played Kessler. So you looked at Kessler's, you looked at Fisher's.
Yes.
You looked at Mrs. Norris that we haven't played yet. And you looked at all the other customer complaints, right?
Right.
But out of all of them, these are the 4 that bother you the most?
Well, they all bother me to some degree. I mean, the Kessler complaint, Mrs. Kessler, she complained about cloudy product, something was wrong with the product. They did take the product back, and in this case, actually Real Water tested it, and they found coliforms in the water. This is fecal matter. They found coliforms in the water, which meant their purification system was not working at Real Water.
Okay.
But what was alarming here is we have, again, this is May of 2014, and we have 3 complaints with the same sort of type of complaints. 2 particularly alarming. A strong chemical smell in the bottle. Gasoline-like substance in a blue liter bottle. Water shouldn't smell like gasoline. So there is something wrong. A strong chemical smell. Gasoline is that chemical smell. Cloudy substance in the water. Something's going on here, and Real Water's response was insufficient, in my opinion.
Okay, and Mr. Desitel, what did he say he would do if he saw these complaints?
He would shut down the operation. He would stop production.
And what should a good quality assurance program do if they see these kind of complaints?
They should really work very hard. Stopping production is certainly one option, and the level of this complaint, I think, would make me want to stop production, because I've got a very strong problem. And again, there were 2 from the same lot. So I know I've got a problem out there. You stop production, you come back and you even recall that production lot. You get it off of people's shelves, you get it off of store shelves, you get it out of people's homes, because it's wrong. It's just wrong. And that's the hydrazine. That's what smells like gasoline. It has an ammonia type smell. That's what is in those products. It's the hydrazine.
Okay, and you mentioned Mrs. Doran's complaint. Let's take a look at that, Shane, please. That's Exhibit 24, I believe. So she was, let's go to the email.
I can step down just at a different
Okay.
angle.
This is the one where her parents come and visit her, they get sick, the dogs get sick, she complains, and it happens over again, correct?
Right, right. And again, this is something that if you receive this as a food company, you're disturbed. Something has been making this person sick. It creates a burning, sour stomach and diarrhea. It's not just not cool, it's dangerous. It's dangerous. So something was definitely off, and this was obviously not the first complaint that people were getting diarrhea from the product. They were getting sick. They felt sick to their stomach after drinking the product. So Ms. Doran's complaint was not unique in any way.
So this was March 3rd, 2017,
Yes,
approximately a year before Ms. Bourdonnais and Lisa King get injured?
yes.
Okay. Now, all these complaints, just the 5 you've seen, those 4 that we highlighted with the chemical smell and gasoline, and this one, should they have done something to test their product?
Yes, what we do in the industry, standard industry practice, is called root cause analysis. So we look at the problem and we figure out what should we do about it. It can be bringing in retained products that we have, because every manufactured lot, you pull off a control sample and you keep that. So you're gonna check those first of all. Then you're gonna bring product in from the field, check that as well. And if you see this, again, gasoline type smell, which is not part of water, shouldn't be there, then you're going to do what we call non-targeted screening analysis. You're gonna send this out to a laboratory and say, help me understand what is this substance? I don't know, but I keep getting consumer complaints about it and I want to know. And they're going to run a series of different tests, which are gonna look for different compounds, and they're gonna tell you. My example of this was, I was at Campbell Soup. We had a soup product that we got consumer complaints, it smells like smelly socks. Well, we didn't know, but soup shouldn't smell like smelly socks either. So we brought it in and we took it out to a laboratory and said, help us, we just want to know what this is. And they did find it, and we were able to recall the product, get it off the shelf that was affected, and start production again and make sure we weren't reproducing that problem.
Now, the non-targeted screening test, that's called a GCMS.
Well, there's multiple analytical tools, but GCMS is gas chromatograph mass spectrometry. There it is, right there.
Okay.
In my day, when I was a graduate student doing these tests, we didn't have the luxury of a combined unit, a combined instrument. So we did gas chromatograph testing and mass spectroscopy testing. And the difference is that the gas chromatograph, you're injecting a sample in, and it's basically a volatile sample, and it's organic, so it contains carbon. That's what you're looking for. Pesticides.
Okay, let's not get into too much detail here. The
Sorry.
point is, for $100, $200, they could have done this kind of test.
Oh, yes, yes. You can do that combined test where you're looking for, again, the mass spec side is actually looking for inorganic compounds like hydrazine. So you would have found it if you just run this test.
And this is the same machine the FDA used in 2021 to find the hydrazine?
Yes.
Not
They
the
found
exact
hydrazine.
same machine, but the same type of machine.
Yes, the same type.
Okay, let's go back to Ms. Kessler's complaint. Shane, can I have 32 up, please? Here's another one you looked at, and I think the jury's heard her deposition already.
Yes, yes. In this case, Ms. Kessler complained about the bottle. She identified where she bought it, and then she sent the bottle. She sent the bottle to test, and the corporate office at Bristol Farms found it quite concerning.
Well, they said they tested it, but you've seen no test report for this bottle, right?
There is a test report for this product. It has coliforms. This is the
Oh,
product
okay,
that
I'm
tested
sorry.
positive for coliforms.
And
Yeah.
coliforms are what again?
It's fecal matter, feces.
Okay.
Poop.
And that's probably not a good thing to put in bottled water?
No, and the process that Real Water claimed they had 7 steps of filtration. They actually put it on their label. We have 7 steps of filtration. Well, somehow fecal matter coliforms made it through 7 steps of filtration. They didn't have a good process.
Okay, and let's take a look at Mr. Fisher's complaint real quick. Shane, that's 28. There's another customer complaint, and again, the jury's already heard his deposition testimony. Go ahead.
Right. So Mr. Fisher's a pilot, and he drank his real water, he felt sick that night, woke up with symptoms of confusion, hand tremors, nausea, vomiting. I'm sure you've seen other testimony that says that's the symptoms of hydrazine poisoning. And he's missed 3 days of work, as well as lingering effects on his memory. So that's a pretty scary type of illness.
Okay. And have you looked at Mr. Watkins' complaint?
Yes.
Okay, Shane, can I have that up? That's Exhibit 30. And Mr. Watkins personally came in here and he testified to the jury. So he was the one that wrote the email about the doctor wanting him to stop drinking the water.
Right, and then his wife was writing the email. But Real Water's response was they're thinking that she's trying to get a cooler rental, a 5-gallon cooler rental for freight, and that she was waffling on her commitment to pay her bill, basically. And so this was very troubling because she was clearly not doing that. But the problem is Mr. Watkins and his wife also did not understand what was making him sick. So they said, it might be the water that we're drinking or whatever. They did not know. But the issue was, it was the alkaline water. The physician told him when he was in the hospital for 2 weeks, stop drinking it. And that he did.
Okay, is this more serious than some of the other complaints we've seen? They are being told that their customer is in the hospital for 2 weeks and the doctor somehow links it to the water.
Right, the doctor's linking it to the water. And again, if you're in a company responsible for the safety of this product and the safety of your customers, you don't take that lightly. You do something about it. In this case, Real Water didn't.
Okay. All right, let's go back to the GCMS machine. Is it your opinion that Real Water should have tested the product before it sold it to the public with this GCMS machine?
Well, standard industry practice is we test our ingredients when they're coming in. We also test our finished product. We test it when we first design it, like we're creating a new product. We test it to make sure that we're making it safely, that everything in it is safe. In combination, also it's safe. And so you do that, and then you also have a requirement to test finished product routinely as well. And simply put, you create a new product, standard industry practice says you test it, make sure it's safe. $200, a little bit more maybe, you could have run it through that machine. They would have found that electrolysis process they're doing in the concentrate room is somehow producing hydrazine.
Okay, and when you were at Campbell's, Heinz, Yum, McDonald's, when they brought out new products, did they test them with these kind of machines?
We tested it with a variety of, again, non-targeted testing just to find out what we have. And a lot of our testing is also microbiologically based, but we do also look for pesticides and other types of unknowns that might be happening in the product, yes.
Okay, and you said you reviewed Mr. Marlowe's trial testimony?
Yes.
Hey, let me show you 2 snippets of his testimony. Go ahead, Shane.
Do you have audio on over there?
But is the TV audio on? So that's
Shane, we can do it with just the words. We don't need the audio. Okay. So let's just review the words. And do you know of any testing that was done, screening testing, non-target testing, any testing by anyone other than what we talked about, the bacteria, the metals? Answer, not that I recall, no. And you're aware that at one point the hydrazine was found by the FDA to be in Real Water? Answer, I'm aware, yes. Next shade. And prior to that time, did you even know what hydrazine was? Answer, no. And I think we got another little clip. Okay. Okay, did you find at any time, did you do at any time any non-targeted testing to find something like hydrazine potentially? No. Okay. And we talked about the FDA finding hydrazine in the water. Answer, yes. That's something Real Water should have known about one way or the other before they sold the product. Do you agree? Well, knowing what we know now, yes. Okay. Do you agree that Real Water should have known what was in the product it was selling before they sold it?
Yes, that's an answer, a question to me, yes. They should have known, and again, that's why you do, when you create a new product, and particularly this type of product. Mr. Marlowe, respectfully, is not a chemist. He admitted in his testimony he's not a chemist. He has no chemistry training. He didn't know what he was doing. He purchased this electrolysis machine from a Russian couple, and they trained him kind of on what to do, and he tweaked it for a while with amperage changes and voltage changes and salt changes and ingredient changes, and he came up with real water and sold it to Real Water. But that's not the way we create products. I mean, he should have known that the electrolysis process itself is complicated. It's chemically complicated. He's adding salts, which do change the product as well. He's using titanium anodes, and titanium rods to do the electrolysis. These are all pretty risky things. And he simply did not understand the dangers and did not do any of that non-targeted testing, but all that should have been done. The process needs to be understood in order to make sure it's safe.
Okay, let's see if we can sum up the key testing facts. Shane? So number one, if they'd done the GCMS test, they would have looked for hundreds of products, including hydrazine, right?
Right, and it's not unique to hydrazine, but they would have found hydrazine because they would have found it as an unknown.
Okay,
Yes.
so if you look for the rainbow of potentials, you find hydrazine.
You would have found hydrazine, yes.
Okay, number two?
The standard GC test costs, the MS test costs $200 to $1,000, and it's done in every lab across the country.
Okay, and three, they didn't do it?
They didn't do the standard non-targeted screening test before they started to sell the product or at any time afterwards. And that's just a miss, just a terrible miss.
Okay, and especially when they had all these complaints about chemical smell and the like, they should have done
Right.
some GCMS testing.
Since 2014, I saw the complaints. I don't know about complaints prior to that, but I saw those gasoline smelling, chemical smelling, fish smelling, foul smelling complaints that was simply not supposed to be part of water.
Okay, and four, Mr. Marlowe, the inventor, he agrees that they should have done, because he answered yes to that question, right?
Yes, and he simply did not understand what he was doing, but neither did Real Water.
Okay, and the last one, when the FDA did the GCMS testing, they found the hydrazine right away.
They found it in 3 different samples of concentrate, yes.
Okay, let's move on to the last area, recall. Do companies do recalls of food and beverage products?
Unfortunately, yes. When we have a problem in it, it can be a voluntary recall. They're all called voluntary, but not necessarily voluntary. But yes, you can have different levels of threat to public health, but recalls are done routinely, yes.
Okay, and on October 15th, 2020, did Real Water do a timely recall?
No, they did not.
Okay, what should they have done?
They should have recalled the product far before October 2020, when they were getting these complaints and found that they didn't know what was going on in the marketplace, but they knew, or I should say in their processing plant, but they knew they had a problem. They should have taken action way before 2020, but the fact is that there was a lot of evidence in 2020. Blaine Jones himself, when he was in the hospital with liver damage, drinking his own water, he still would not pull the trigger to do a recall. But that was what could have gotten the water out of the hands of people who were harmed by it subsequent to October 2020.
So, and you've looked at Mr. Randolph's deposition
Yes,
and trial testimony?
yes,
Okay. He went in and asked Mr. Jones twice to do a recall, right?
yes.
And it was refused.
Mr. Jones, despite the fact he was in the hospital with liver damage, refused. Yes,
Okay. And some of the plaintiffs in this case got sick after October 15th, 2020, correct?
correct. It's my understanding.
Shane, can I have the slide, please? And when you do a recall, this is what you're trying to prevent, other people getting hurt.
The issue is to get the product out of the marketplace. You can, sometimes it's in your control, and that's an easy recall. In this case, it wasn't in their control, it wasn't in their warehouses. They would have had to go to the retail marketplace and ask for withdrawal or a recall. That's done all the time. You'll see people in grocery stores pulling things off the shelf and also contacting consumers who purchased it because they have a record of you purchasing it. You get a message if they can get to you through their loyalty programs, et cetera. So you get information about the recall. They could have done that, and these people would have been notified at least. If they were able to buy the product at all, they could have been notified that the product had a public health hazard and it was dangerous to them.
And to the extent that these people were 5-gallon home delivery and Real Water was delivered it to them, they could have just gone to their homes and got the water back.
Of course, that would be the easy thing to do, and they could have done it. They didn't.
Okay. So let's sum up here. Let's go to the very last slide, Shane. Very last. Okay, so these are the things that you think Real Water did wrong, correct?
Yes, they didn't do that non-targeted screening that would have found hydrazine prior to putting the product in the marketplace for sale or any time during their production time period.
Okay, 2.
And I should add that they didn't respond to those red flags that they saw coming in from their consumer complaints. They had poor, non-existent quality assurance. I mean, this is not standard industry practice. This is not how you do business. This is not how you protect and keep your customers. You don't want to hurt your customers. They're your customers. So there's no benefit to do that.
3.
Real Water knew of serious consumer complaints and failed to investigate them, do that root cause analysis, and review its manufacturing process. They just did not do that at any point in time.
Instead, they gave people free water.
They gave them free cases of water, yes.
Okay. What's the next one, Shane? Okay.
They waited 5 months to start a recall, despite Blaine Jones being in the hospital, and also Anthony Randolph begging him to do a recall in October 2020.
Okay, and the last one we've already talked about, the FDA findings
Right.
that mirror your opinion.
Yes, are consistent with everything that I felt from my review of all the information.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Hutt.
Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Adams Hutt?
Dr. Hutt, please.
Dr. Hutt, pardon me.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Hutt, before we begin, I just want to focus on one thing that I think is just a little bit misleading. You repeatedly referenced that Blaine Jones did not attempt a recall despite being in the hospital with a liver injury, correct?
As I understand, he was in the hospital and he was asked to do a recall by Mr. Randolph and refused to do it.
You've read his testimony.
I've read his testimony, yes.
So you are aware that he had absolutely no idea through his medical treatment or any other means that it could have been the real water that was causing his injury, correct?
I don't know that I understand that because he wasn't drinking real water. He was in the hospital. In all likelihood, he probably got better. And I don't know what the physicians told him.
You're aware that he kept drinking real water after he got out of the hospital?
I don't know that for a fact.
Okay.
I don't, clearly if he were in the hospital, he probably wasn't drinking real water.
So you're making an assumption here about Blaine Jones' state of mind or his knowledge as to the potential danger, and you're attributing that to say that real water should have done a recall based on facts that don't actually exist. Would that be accurate?
No. I think that he knew there was a problem with the water. He had for years complaints of people getting sick with symptoms that probably were very similar to his, and he did nothing.
Sure. You can see how it would be misleading to the jury to imply that when he was in the hospital, he was diagnosed with an issue that was caused by real water.
He, again, had many complaints, had visibility to those complaints, the similar symptoms as he was experiencing.
Respectfully, doctor, that was not my question. My question is, you can see how it would be misleading to the jury to imply on the stand under oath that Blaine Jones had knowledge of some sort that real water caused his liver injury and refused to do a recall anyways. Is that not a misleading statement if you don't know that for a fact?
No, it is not misleading because I put it in context, and I'm going to give Mr. Jones the benefit of knowing the history that he should have known.
Sure. Okay.
Because he lived through it.
So before we get into the rest of your testimony, I wanted to clear that up. Do have some threshold questions about the world of how we're defining industry standard.
Yes.
Because it's kind of an ethereal term, right?
Well, it's not.
Well, let's define it then.
Okay.
So start with, we've talked about how HACCP comes from NASA, right? And then we've talked about your implementation through these billion-dollar corporations, Heinz, Coors, et cetera, correct?
Well, yes, they did it before it became a mandatory regulatory requirement.
Okay.
Yes, which it has become.
And so my question is, when you were forming these opinions, what specific standards, what specific sources were you relying upon to reach these conclusions? Were they trade organizations? I think you said regulations. Were they your own personal experience or your personal opinions based on drafting, or refining HACCP? Just give the jury a general sense of what went into your analysis.
Well, again, I lived through this movement of the industry coming together to find a better way to manage food safety. And the National Academy of Sciences had issued 4 reports that we needed to start using HACCP as a regulatory tool because it was a better assurance of food safety. So we came together to develop the best industry standard for that, and also created audits that were based on that industry standard, which incorporated HACCP. So that was the voluntary movement forward. Meanwhile, it became a regulatory requirement through FDA as well as USDA to utilize HACCP and a HACCP type program called HARP-C, Hazard Analysis Risk-Based Prevention Controls. But those are all regulatory tools now, which are prevailing upon the industry, including real water. So these are not just my ideas, but these are good ideas. Before they became regulatory requirements, they were best practices, and the way that the entire industry moved, small and large. So I've worked with the National Restaurant Association, working with small restaurants, mom and pop organizations, and they were also utilizing HACCP. HACCP was a way everyone is managing food safety, was during the 2010 period, and has gone on to become a regulatory requirement.
Of course. And just for clarification, nobody here is challenging whether or not HACCP has a role in the way that Real Water operated their business. So I think we're on the same page there. What I'm trying to do is just get the framework of what sources you're drawing this from. So I have a couple of questions in that regard. You mentioned the Codex Alimentarius Commission. I didn't think that was going to come up, but it did. Can you give us a little more information on your role in that particular body?
Sure. So the Codex Alimentarius is a food standards setting organization. It sets standards for all types of commodities as well as sanitation, food safety things, and they work through different committees. I chaired the Food Hygiene Committee, which was the committee through which we came up with the HACCP program. We codified it as a final standard within Codex, and then it's voluntary, but every government in the world adopted it as their food safety tool. But we codified it so it's one standard through the Codex Alimentarius. I chaired the Food Hygiene Committee, I chaired the working group that designed HACCP, and I continue to work with those officials for quite some time.
As a matter of fact, the World Health Organization adopted HACCP with guidance from the Codex, correct?
Well, Codex is an arm of the World Health Organization, joint with the Food Agricultural Organization, FAO.
Yes, and so the HACCP provisions that were adopted, or the HACCP provisions that are enforced by or recommended by the World Health Organization, you had a direct role in preparing, would that be accurate?
Yes, creating, yes.
Okay.
As a consensus, international consensus.
Of course, wasn't you by yourself, right?
No, sir, it was not.
So you're familiar then, it's fair to say you're familiar with the way that the WHO applies HACCP and provides guidance for HACCP compliance, correct?
They provide guidance. They have no enforcement authority, but they can provide guidance on HACCP. Again, it's voluntary. They just set a standard. Then the governments have to adopt it.
Sure. And so I guess my question then would be, did your experience with Codex, would the way that the World Health Organization apply HACCP standards have factored into your opinions in this case?
No, because the World Health Organization just created and maintains a publication of the standard. They don't do anything with that standard other than we created it. It came up through our system, 8 steps in the Codex process to become codified, if you will. And then they just leave it alone. I mean, it's up to, again, each country to adopt it or not.
Okay, but I guess I'm confused because you did review the correspondence between Real Water and NSF International, correct?
The correspondence? What do you mean?
That came along with the NSF audits that we were just looking at earlier?
Well, the auditor's comments, if you're saying that's correspondence, yes. Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask a broader question. Are you familiar with the fact that that particular audit was conducted in compliance with World Health Organization standards specifically?
Well, no, it's in compliance with the bottled water regulations of FDA.
Can we pull up, I think Exhibit 2060 is pre-admitted? Robin, if we could. Sorry, if you want to verify that for me real quick. Thank you.
26 is admitted.
No, 2060.
Please. $2060?
Correct.
No, I don't have that.
Okay. That's fine. Because I don't have the plaintiff's version in front of me. Well, let me just go a little bit broader then because I don't want to deal with that right now. Okay, so the WHO, World Health Organization, provides guidance on the implementation of HACCP, and I guess specifically with regards to hazard analysis. If somebody was following World Health Organization directives on conducting hazard analysis, would you agree that that was an appropriate way to go about making sure you were HACCP compliant?
No, because again, WHO, FAO, the Codex creates a standard. It's up to the individual countries to adopt it. In this case, the US FDA, as well as USDA, did adopt it in full. And then the Codex can create recommendations for how to do that hazard analysis. But then, more importantly for real water in this case, was how FDA regulated the process of hazard analysis.
So just out of curiosity, are you able to separate out your opinions in this case at all from regulatory compliance? Do you see any difference between industry standards and regulatory compliance in this case?
Industry standards must be compliant with regulatory requirements. That's a given. I can't separate them because they are inseparable.
Understood. Okay. So what about the International Bottled Water Association? Did you review their code of conduct? Are you familiar with their policies?
No, I'm familiar with the FDA's bottled water regulations,
That
two
wasn't
parts.
a question, respectfully, Doctor. I'm asking, you're familiar with the IBWA, correct?
I'm familiar with them. I don't believe that their standards are relevant in this case.
So you're familiar with the fact that they have a code of practice that's specifically tailored for HACCP compliance, correct?
I'm not familiar with the details of that, but I understand the details of the regulatory requirements.
I should have asked this at the beginning, but how many bottled water companies have you consulted for over the years?
I've worked directly with NSF on their audits, on their standard for bottled water many, many years ago.
Do you recall when?
Probably 2004, 2003.
Have you ever specifically worked with a bottled water manufacturer directly?
Yes.
Who?
Niagara.
Okay, and when was that?
Probably, it's in my litigation history actually, but probably 2010.
Okay, and in that particular context, you still didn't pay attention to the International Bottled Water Association's code of practice?
They weren't relevant to that, and not
Sure.
in this case either.
Okay. So, just go through this real quick. Now, under HACCP standards, at least the World Health Organization states that an auditor must be a person of integrity, skilled in audit and inspection processes, skilled in the process that is being undertaken, and importantly here, able to communicate effectively on any questionable issue. Do you believe that those are standards that should be applied to the NSF auditors that conducted audits at Real Water?
Well, the more relevant requirement is what FDA requires of hazard analysis and bottled water audits. I think that's,
So
again, WHO simply has guidance. They leave it up to countries to adopt them in regulations, and FDA has done that for the bottled water regulations.
And Doctor, respectfully, my question is whether or not you agree with that particular guidance.
I don't recall that particular guidance specifically, but again, I know the bottled water regulations from FDA.
Okay. So other than FDA regulations and what you call industry standards that are based on FDA regulations, what else, if anything, did you consider in establishing industry standards in this case?
My experience of 40 years in the food industry, again, creating audits, gold standard audits, applying them, applying quality management system programs that include HACCP and ISO 9000. I included my experience, my vast experience.
Your Honor, may we approach? Just said exactly
I got three of them. No more questions.
All right, thank you, Your Honor. Okay, so we went over some of the documents that you reviewed in forming your opinion. This is the last part of the threshold information I want to go over.
Okay.
So before we get started, you did review the NSF audits, correct?
Yes, from 2014 to through 2019.
Perfect. And we went through the deposition testimony that you reviewed.
Yes.
Desatel. Did you review Amy Jones?
I don't recall reading Amy Jones' deposition.
Okay. Blaine Jones? Yes?
Blaine Jones, all of his depositions, yes.
Perfect. Brent Jones?
No,
Okay. Did you ever actually interview any of the owners of the senior leadership team of Real Water and forming your opinions?
no.
Okay. So in your forming your opinions, I guess you had absolutely no knowledge as to Brent Jones or Amy Jones's, their version of the facts or their story of the case, correct?
Well, I've read emails by Amy Jones stating her opinions relative to the NSF audits. I've read deposition testimony from Blaine Jones that referenced his father as well as his stepmother and their role in the organization and some of their actions. I've read deposition testimony from Mr. Desatel that explained how he viewed the negligent actions of Ms. Jones as well as Blaine Jones. I've read Patty Converse's deposition testimony also talking about those individuals. Many testimonies are referencing those individuals, yes.
Okay. And so let's go through some of these documents that you reviewed because I want to know how they factored into your analysis. We're going to start with what is called the Real Water Process Flow Chart.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
There's two versions that I've seen.
Okay.
They are also commented in the audits, multiple audits, that they don't have an up-to-date process flow.
Of course.
And in every flow diagram that I've seen, they all omit the preparation of concentrate, which, as I've said multiple times, is the most complex and dangerous part of the whole manufacturing process of real water. So all those process flows omit suite 145, the preparation of concentrate.
Sure. But taking a step back for HACCP purposes, preparing a flow chart, inaccurate as it may be, is one of the steps in HACCP compliance, correct?
It's a preceding step. It's not actually a step, but it has to be done in order to do a hazard analysis completely.
It precedes the 7 principles of HACCP.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. What about our real water testing and treatment records?
I've seen some records, yes.
Okay, so you're familiar with testing that was going on in the facility?
Yes.
And that includes TDS testing, biological testing?
Microbiological. Mhm.
Sure. Radiological testing?
I don't know that I've seen radium tests, but the hazards are physical, microbiological, chemical. And radiological.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for that. And so did you review the HACCP summary from Real Water that discussed the fact that they were doing radiological testing? I take it no?
I don't recall that information. They might have, because that is a requirement of EPA and FDA in terms of the bottled water regulations, yes.
Okay, so it wouldn't surprise you that that testing was going on?
No, it's mandatory that it be done.
Okay. But that wasn't provided to you as part of your set of records?
I don't recall seeing the test results per se.
Okay. And then let's see here. Quality control point finished product testing for November 3rd, 2020 through March 16th, 2021. These are the Casey Aiken logs. Do you recall these documents?
I don't recall seeing the logs themselves.
Okay.
I do remember reference, though, in the FDA inspection report that they did not do micro testing on finished products every week as required.
Okay. But this is the only reason I'm asking, this is actually in your report. You don't remember seeing these?
I'm just not recalling them off the top of my head, no.
Okay. And so we were just discussing one of the HACCP summaries. You have a different HACCP summary on your report from February 18th, 2019. Do you recall that record?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay.
I'm happy to be refreshed.
Okay, perfect. Hazard analysis line 3. Do you recall this record?
I've seen hazard analysis, 2 different hazard analysis from Real Water, yes.
Okay. And just more broadly, these are all business records that were obtained from Real Water as part of this litigation, correct?
I assume so, yes.
Okay. And so you relied on these records as being true and accurate for the purpose of forming your opinions?
Well, yes, in the case of the hazard analysis that I saw, number 1, it didn't include any reference to concentrate, and number 2, that's only a part of it. It did include monitoring, critical limits, et cetera, frequency of testing, et cetera,
Okay.
all of which are required.
You reviewed a HACCP critical control points record from 2019?
I reviewed a hazard analysis. I don't remember seeing a critical control point system or a food safety plan because I don't believe they existed.
How about just again going off your report here, the November 17th, 2014 HACCP plan quality policy? Did you read the HACCP policy from Real Water?
I read it. Again, a policy, as I talk about this architecture, standard operating procedures, work instructions on the bottom, that's where the operator actually works, standard operating procedures above that. Then policy should be driving everything below that. The policy, if it's not implemented, is moot. It's useless.
So you disagree with the way that the policy was prepared or the way the policy was implemented or both?
I don't have any knowledge on the preparation, but I do take difference with the fact that that the policies are not being implemented. The standard operating procedures, which are derived from the policy, were not being utilized by the people who were responsible for quality.
And we'll get to that in a minute. What about the Division 5 stat reports? Do you recall these?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you recall reviewing a HACCP team chart? I know we had talked about putting a HACCP team together, at least you did with Councilor Kemp. Do you recall seeing the chart for the HACCP team that Real Water had?
I recall seeing notes of the HACCP team meetings in 2019. I remember, again, the reference by the auditor that the HACCP team chart was not complete.
In 2018.
In 2018.
Correct.
And again, it's referenced because the HACCP team is a standard on every one of the audits, and so it is referenced. And it was limited on each one of those audit findings. And in 2018, it was, again, Blaine Jones was everybody.
Sure. And in this particular instance, this is according to your records, a January 7, 2019 HACCP team chart.
Yes.
You don't recall giving that a review as part of your...
Again, many things were changing from the audit, which was done in December 6th, 2018, to their re-audit in February of 2019.
Of course.
And they were creating a lot of HACCP documents. They brought in an individual quality control director, Tom Pham, who was creating a lot of those documents. They were doing HACCP team meetings, and required agenda and required notes from those meetings were produced on, I think, 3 different weeks.
Okay, so if I understand your testimony correctly, in 2019, they brought on a qualified individual, correct?
I don't know if he was trained. I assume he was trained in HACCP. I believe he was responsible for HACCP and other companies. So I believe he was trained, yes.
Okay, so they brought on a qualified individual. They started preparing and trying to fix their documentation, correct?
They started trying to prepare and fix the documentation that was remiss before, yes.
Okay, so we're moving the right direction. So we have a QI, we have documentation.
A QI?
Qualified individual.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Sorry. That's not the term of art you use. I'll stay away from it. So we have a qualified individual. We have documentation. You said we're having meetings now, correct?
In the month of January 2019, they had 3 meetings, 3 weeks in a row, which is required to be routine. Weekly is good, and they were having those meetings. Yes.
Okay, weekly is good, and I assume that this was, well, let me ask you a question differently. Who was in these meetings?
It was 2 people, Tom Pham
Okay.
and Mike Bush.
Okay, and what was Mike Bush's role in the company?
He was production operations manager, I believe.
Okay, so we have somebody that's familiar with HACCP, and we have somebody multidisciplinarily responsible for the production floor, and they are overseeing the HACCP program for Real Water in 2019. Would that be accurate?
I don't know how much they were overseeing it. They were trying to correct their documentation deficiencies.
Sure.
I know that the audit, done in February 2019, identified Blaine Jones as a qualified individual and not Tom Pham. I don't know why.
Well, turnover happens in companies, does it not?
I understand Tom Pham was still there in February 2019.
Are you familiar with Blaine Jones personally going and getting HACCP certified?
I saw documentation to that effect, yes.
Okay, and we'll get into that in a little bit too. All right, and then you said you reviewed customer complaints, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So you're comfortable having a conversation about some of the complaints that otherwise didn't get brought up in direct. Would that be fair?
If I've seen them, yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay. Set that there for a moment. All right, so Dr. Hutt, one of the things I'd like to kind of get into today, because I think it will assist the jury, is distinguishing between the cause of what happened with the plaintiffs in this case and everything else that was going on with the operation of the company. You understand what I'm saying? Follow me for now.
I'm channeling, yes.
Appreciate you. So, you do understand that in this particular case, the court has already held Real Water liable for the plaintiff's injuries, correct?
I understand that, yes.
The court has said that Real Water caused those injuries.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, so everybody here together understands that what we're looking at right now is just how did this happen?
Yes.
Okay. Now, with that in mind, if we're asking how did this happen, I went through some of the noted deficiencies in your report, and I have to wonder what they have to do with how hydrazine got in the water. So you mentioned cleanliness of the facility, right? So if an NSF audit looked around, and you said they didn't look at the concentrate room, correct?
They did not.
Okay, so if they're looking around the facility and they're looking at the production line, but that concentrate has already been made and that hydrazine has already been in the water, would you agree with me that this particular deficiency has nothing to do with how the plaintiffs were injured in the first place?
Well, no, because again, there are sanitation requirements throughout the entire facility, and there were deficiencies in these NSF audits throughout time that I saw on sanitation. And also testimony from Mr. Desautels and Ms. Converse testified about the lack of sanitation across the plant, not focusing on the concentrate room, which they weren't allowed to see, but the plant had sanitation issues. Mr. Desautels said that he stopped production once and got yelled at by the Joneses because he wasn't allowed to do that as QC director, but he stopped because of sanitation deficiencies. They were making dirty water.
How, in any way, shape, or form, did that change the electrohydrolysis or, the process for actually creating the concentrate in the first place? Dirt has no impact in that, right?
It demonstrates the disregard for quality processes, standard industry practices, as well as regulatory requirements.
Understood. Okay. So that includes, and I believe you were critical of the cleanliness of the janitor's room. Do you recall making that finding?
That was one of the things I saw, yes.
Okay. And you believe that that is material to your opinions in this case as to Real Water's culpability for putting hydrazine in the water?
As again, it demonstrates to me a disregard for best industry practices, regulatory requirements, making safe water, and understanding quality procedures. Because in every audit, you also audit the janitor's room, the bathrooms, you look at them for sanitation and cleanliness.
The same with your criticism of employees wearing jewelry on the floor?
That is not allowed because that is, again, disregard for good quality practices and making safe product.
And your criticism that some of the vents were missing air filters?
I'm sorry, say again?
That some of the vents in the facility were missing air filters?
Yes, because that's, again, a disregard for cleanliness of the facility and the product ultimately.
Okay. And I have to assume the same goes for things like pest control practices, bottle labeling, things along those lines?
Absolutely. Those are all, again, best industry practices, quality procedures, and regulatory requirements.
Okay. So in your mind, you're evaluating this company at a broader level than just what they should have done to prevent hydrazine from entering the water?
Yes, because I take the issue of hydrazine in context of their entire operation, the culture of their operation, as well as actually what they demonstrated, what they did.
Sure. But we're not here because there was dirt or styrofoam in the water, are we?
Well, I think they are linked because, again, if you had a culture and a mentality about quality and mindfulness, you will not be producing product and putting it in the marketplace without finished product testing, without, again, that non-targeted testing, and you would have found the hydrazine.
Okay, well, let's get into that particular aspect of it because I don't currently understand how non-targeted testing and styrofoam or dirt in the water are linked. Maybe you can help me out with that. First and foremost, when we're talking about HACCP principles, we've said there's 7 principles. The first one is hazard analysis, correct?
Yes.
The point of this is to find or to prepare for either, and I think the term is known or reasonably foreseeable hazards, correct?
Yes.
Okay. In this particular case, you've referred to the process that created the water as a novel process. Is that correct?
It's not novel. Electrolysis has been around since the 1700s, but it is a complex procedure.
How many other bottled water companies are currently using electrified titanium tubes to make their water? Do you know?
I don't know.
Okay. How many other companies are you aware of? Let's start with the big ones. Do you know any bottled water companies that have had an issue with hydrazine in the water besides Real Water?
I'm not aware, no.
You're not aware of any scientific studies that have ever shown hydrazine to be in a bottled water product?
I have not done a full search analysis for that question, but
Sure.
I don't recall any off the top of my head.
Okay. Are you familiar with any other, well, let's start here. Are you familiar with Dr. Najim, or Nassim, excuse me? I think I'm pronouncing his name wrong, but Dr. Najim,
I think I'm not familiar with him, no.
plaintiff civil engineer.
Okay. I have
Test-
heard the name, yes.
Okay, I didn't know if you had a chance to read his report because he testified he'd never seen someone use titanium tubes to make water. And so I'm trying to get to the crux of just how unique this process really was. Because we heard testimony that couldn't even distill this down to one theory. We have two theories right now about how the hydrazine may have come into the water in the first place. Would that surprise you that the nature of this particular issue is that rare?
It is, but I think the other issue to me is that the tubes, whatever they are, were not maintained. They were not replaced. They should have been replaced. Again, these metals corrode, they erode, whether it's titanium or anything else. And as I understand it, these titanium tubes that they were using in the concentrate room were never replaced from the time Mr. Marlowe generated this and sold the product to Real Water and in 2020.
So part of your opinion is based on your belief that the titanium tubes were corroding or eroding into the concentrate?
They were creating hydrazine is what I think, based on the chemistry of it all and my understanding of hydrazine. But that's my speculation, and it's not an official opinion.
Of course.
However, hydrazine was being created.
Well, and so getting to the crux of the point, before the Real Water incident, hydrazine wasn't actually a known concern in the bottled water industry, was it?
I don't know that I know that that's not true. I don't know. Clearly, it is a known hazard.
Okay.
And it is a reducing agent and certainly could be created throughout an electrolysis process. But I don't know that, because I don't know that other companies are using titanium anodes in their electrolysis process. Actually, I don't know anyone creating real water anymore.
Yes, we can. All right, and council, I want to thank everyone. And ladies and gentlemen, it's my understanding we have a stipulation, agreement by the parties, that there was no hydrazine in the source water obtained from the Las Vegas Valley Water District. Is that correct, council?
That is correct, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. All
So-
right, and we need a break. That's what Mark was telling me. We need a break. I was ready to plow through it, but if you need a break, I need a break. All right? Ladies and gentlemen, you're admonished not to converse amongst yourselves or with anyone else on any subject matter connected with this trial, or to read, watch, or listen to any report or commentary on the trial of any persons connected with this case, or by any medium of information, including without limitations, newspaper, television, radio, social media. Remember that, you know. And you've learned a lot. I mean, actually, you've had experts come in, you can ask questions, and that's how you should do it. Last but not least, do not form or express any opinion on any subject matter connected with this trial until the cause is finally submitted to you. And let's take 10.
All rights to report to the jury.
Well, you know, here's the thing, and we're very fortunate we have a stipulation on damages. As far as Ms. King's concerned, that saves us probably 2 days, I bet. At least it.
We're making that
Maybe
day
after.
No.
More experts, well, it's at least a
Yeah,
day.
maybe 2 days. Yeah, Judge, we don't need to wait for Mr. Parker, we can proceed.
Oh, yeah, we will.
No, we don't need to.
I'm just- And tomorrow will be 9 o'clock.
There's 8:45 in the jury, Judge.
I know.
All rights to the jury.
All right, do the parties stipulate to the presence of the jury?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good. Yes, sir.
All right, we can continue on.
All right, Dr. Hutt, we're going to summarize and then move along. So my understanding is that the only form of testing that would have detected hydrazine in the water is non-targeted GCMS testing, correct?
Non-targeted testing using the mass spec
Correct.
machine.
Okay.
Yes,
And there are a lot of other forms of testing out there, correct?
correct.
And there were a lot of different tests that Real Water is actually conducting routinely on its water in compliance with HACCP standards, correct?
Not with HACCP standards, but with the bottled water standards, and they were targeted testing, yes.
Okay. Let's see here. So let's go to the issue. You said that the customer complaint process was deficient, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And I believe you said that the complaints that should have triggered an analysis as to whether or not there was hydrazine in the water go all the way back to 2014.
Correct.
Okay. Can we bring up Exhibit 34, Robin? And Your Honor, the customer complaints are all on the pre-admitted list that we received yesterday. Okay. Are you able to read that? Can we blow that up a little bit, Robin?
I can read it.
Okay. So in this particular complaint, there was a purchase at Joe's Downtown Market by a customer that he found dirt particles or dust in the water. Now, dust particles or dirt particles are not consistent with any indication that there's hydrazine in the water, is it?
No, they're consistent with the inadequacies of the 7-step filtration process that was used in the sanitation in the Real Water facility.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with the creation of the concentrate, does it?
Well, again, I take this in context.
But yes or no,
quality
does that have
procedures.
anything to do with the creation of the concentrate, Dr. Hutt?
Well, again, it speaks to the whole matter of quality procedures and a culture for quality in the organization, which does relate to the hydrazine, yes.
So let me ask you a secondary question. In this particular complaint, is Real Water not attempting to get a copy or trying to get a sample of the water that was allegedly dirty so that it can investigate?
I don't see that in this statement.
Let's scroll down. Let's see here.
It ends with, he said he went to the hospital, wasn't very happy.
Okay, let me see where that is. Robin, go up to the top corner. I might be thinking of the other complaint here.
I think you're thinking of a different complaint.
Okay, then let's go to 36. Okay. So again, what I'd like to bring to your attention here is there was a customer complaint about a quote-unquote strange substance in one of the blue liter bottles. They had the customer send them the bottle, correct?
That is correct?
They did pH testing, correct?
Yes.
They did ORP testing.
Yes.
They did TDS testing.
Yes.
And then they went and got a control bottle from the same date shift and tested that as well, correct?
Yes, and they were not compliant with their own internal quality standards.
The point is that they did have procedures in place to attempt to address customer complaints. It's just not up to your standards, correct?
No, that is not correct, because this showed that their own standards were not being met. The pH was marketed as being between 8.0, and in their specification internally, it was 8 to 9. It was 7. That's neutral. That's the water you drink out of the tap. The ORP was negative. What negative? I don't know. The total dissolved solids, the TDS, measured 57. Their internal target is 20 to 30 for finished product. It was high. Something's wrong. This should have triggered the reaction that something is wrong with their own control as well as with the customer's product.
Once the concentrate was already created.
This doesn't relate to the concentrate as much as
Thank
it
you.
relates to their process. It was off. It wasn't
Okay.
being controlled.
And then let's go to 40. This is 2016. So this particular client purchased water from a gas station in Minnesota. And again, she tested the water. She said the readings were not accurate. So what we're discussing here is a possible issue with how the pH levels are coming out in the product, correct?
As well as the oxidation reduction potential, which should be negative. In this case, she found it to be positive.
Again, nothing to do with the hydrazine in the concentrate, correct?
Again, it does, because it indicates the process is off, it's not being controlled, and that relates to the manufacture of hydrazine as well.
Doctor,
Their
would-
entire process was not correct.
Would TDS or ORP testing demonstrate that there was a chemical like hydrazine in the water?
No.
So if they were alerted to the fact that there was possibly an issue with the pH, and that was the testing they would use to determine whether or not that complaint was valid, the entire process would have absolutely no bearing on whether or not the company knew or should have known that there was hydrazine in the water, correct?
It tells them they're not manufacturing according to their own standards.
Respectfully,
And that tells
Dr.
them,
Hutt, my question's a little bit different. My question is, when you're receiving complaints, because one of your opinions here is they should have known about the need to do non-targeted testing for hydrazine in water. And you're saying it goes all the way back to 2014, and the last two complaints that we've looked at had to do with the pH level in the water. And so what did they do logically? They test for the pH, correct?
they had other complaints in the same time period about gasoline smell, which they were not following through with and investigating.
Okay. Point being, we understand that ultimately hydrazine got into water that went out to the customers and that Real Water is liable for that. But the idea that they've done no testing, that they had no process in place is demonstrably false.
That is absolutely incorrect, because this actually demonstrates that they are doing testing which show they're out of control according to their own procedures, and they're doing nothing about it.
So this, when you say out of control, this is what you're using to define it?
pH of 7 is
Okay.
tap water.
Okay.
It's not real water, and ORP being positive is also not real water. It wasn't real water. It's misbranding.
Okay, so I think I understand your position. So here we have an out-of-control company delivering tap water to its customers. So let's talk about the leadership of that company. How many HACCP certified individuals does a company need?
It needs to have at least one, but then obviously there are multiple shifts, so they need to have more than one.
Okay. Now I understand you've worked for companies like Heinz. You would typically have an entire quality assurance team, correct?
Yes.
Was that your expectation for Real Water?
No, I intended,
The objection will be sustained.
Thank you, Your Honor. Okay. So getting back to the question, Dr. Hutt, the crux of it being this, when you were evaluating Real Water, all you were looking for is to have one qualified individual, and I think you said per shift, correct?
the qualified individuals for HACCP, yes.
Correct, yes. Yes, thank you for the clarification.
And then the expectation is that they had people who were aware of quality and were implementing quality procedures, which they did not.
It's part of the HACCP team, correct?
Well, the HACCP team is one element of their performance. But safety is not just predicated on having a HACCP team, it's the whole context of HACCP program, which includes having quality procedures and following them.
So I didn't hear the name Andres Vargas come up, but you are aware that in the NSF audits, Mr. Vargas was identified as a qualified individual in 2015 and 2016, correct?
I recall seeing that.
Okay. And we've already discussed the fact that Blaine Jones in 2017 became HACCP certified in order to fill that role, correct?
6 days before the audit, yes.
Okay. I guess my question then is, you seem critical of the fact that it was before the audit, but it did get done, didn't it?
Yes, it got done for the audit. However, the issue is that the person there is to be certified for a purpose, and that is to be able to implement HACCP long-term and keep it sustained in place. And getting certified 6 days before the audit does not tell me that there's a culture about quality and adherence to HACCP principles in that operation at Real Water.
Understood. Okay. So if we're talking about evaluation of adherence to HACCP principles, that is kind of the function of the NSF when they were coming into the audits, right?
No,
There's an entire section dedicated to HACCP compliance?
they're not responsible. NSF is not responsible for implementing HACCP at Real Water. Real Water is responsible for implementing HACCP at Real Water and maintaining it.
I totally understand that, but NSF is the one that's coming in to evaluate that compliance, correct?
They are one aspect of compliance, yes. There's also a regulatory aspect of
And
compliance.
so Costco, the client in question that had facilitated these NSF audits with Real Water, had a certain passing percentage, correct? That would allow them to do business with Real Water?
Costco did have their own passing percentage, yes.
Okay, that was 85%?
Yes.
Okay. And that was, again, based on International World Health Organization standards, correct?
No, no.
Okay.
The passing score has nothing to do with that. And as a quality professional, what's more important than the score is the comments from the auditor, and that's what we look for, not just the score. The score is secondary. What we're interested in is what's actually happening, and that's our snapshot into that operation at that time.
So let's start with Exhibit 42, Robin. And again, Your Honor, all the NSF reports have been pre-admitted. Okay, so can we zoom into the summary by category, Robin? Okay. So now in this particular case, this was an audit done on December 5th of 2014, correct?
Yes,
Did you review this in forming your opinion?
yes,
Okay. And there was a 95.6% category score for HACCP compliance?
yes,
And there was a 100% score for quality compliance, correct?
yes,
Okay. Do you take issue with any of the findings in this particular audit?
yes.
How so?
They had no knowledge of the concentrate room.
Okay.
They had no knowledge that the HACCP program was not complete, the hazard analysis was not complete, because they had no knowledge of the secret room, Suite 145, where Blaine Jones was making concentrate without anybody seeing it, including his quality directors and the people accountable for quality.
Sure, but you've also testified in this case that all of these topics go to the culture of the company.
As assessed by a bottled water regulation and as assessed by this NSF audit, it's
Okay.
not endemic totally of the culture. It shows part of it, and it's a good snapshot. It's useful, but it is not everything. And HACCP was not being implemented in large part because, again, Rail Water was keeping part of their operation, the most critical to safety part of their operation, secret from their own employees.
And so when it comes to all of the other contemplated aspects of a HACCP plan, they got a 95.6, other than the concentrate room, which I understand your point. Is that correct?
The point is,
Yes or no, Dr. Hutt? Is
no,
that
I don't
correct?
agree with the premise because, again, it's the HACCP plan is not complete unless
Okay.
you include the concentrate. This is immaterial. This score and its result is immaterial because the most critical to safety part of their operation was omitted
And so
by
n-
design.
And now that we're here, how much emphasis do you put on what we raised earlier in this testimony, pest control 100%? Is that important to you?
Yes, and if you look at the comments, the comment largely is they've outsourced pest control to Orkin, and so they kind of dismissed that part of the standard.
Because it's being done.
It's being done by a third party, which
Okay.
also Rail Water fired Orkin later on the audits as they show.
Sure. So let's go to number 43. And let's pull up the same summary by category, Robin. Now, we said 85% is passing, correct?
Yes, and if you
Okay.
round this up, it's 86%, yes, but again, as I said, the comments are far more important than the score, and these comments where you had quality and HACCP at 75.5% and 78.3% respectively,
Sure.
employee practices 83.3%, processing 73.1%, receiving, storage, shipping at 87.5%. These show significant deficiencies in their program.
And doctor, I think the point that we're trying to get to is that if there weren't some deficiencies in the program, we probably wouldn't be here today, correct?
That's a hypothetical question.
I understand.
guess.
But some deficiencies also means some compliance. And it looks to me, if there's a 78.3% category score for HACCP compliance, that Real Water was taking active steps to facilitate its HACCP program. Would you agree with the NSF audit in that regard?
Well, again, they weren't a complete failure, and again, they were not considering the most critical to safety component of the real water process, which was the concentrate preparation and the electrolysis process.
Okay, let's go to 44. Now, this was an audit that was stopped, which I understand you take issue with, correct?
I don't recall that I know it was stopped.
Let's scroll down, Robin, to the second page. Let's go down to notes. A little bit further. Keep going down, Robin. Yeah. The section where the auditor talks about. Here we go. Let's see here. Section note. There you go. Section 1522 of the audit. Under section 1, Robin. There you go. Does that refresh your recollection at all, Doctor?
It says C notes. I don't see the notes here.
So
No.
section 1522 of the audit was not completed. Client requested to stop the audit.
I see that.
Okay. Did you do any research into why this audit was stopped?
No.
Okay. So if Real Water was reaching out to NSF to make sure that they understood the standards that were being implemented so that they could pass the audit, you would be surprised to find that out.
Then they should have been re-audited immediately, and Costco should have been notified, and I have no knowledge that they were.
Now, a re-audit can happen within a couple of months, right? I believe 3 months is the...
It's supposed to be within 3 months, yes.
Okay, so let's go to 45. So they were supposed to be re-audited right away. That would be within 3 months. The date of this I'll represent is March 14th, 2016.
And what was the date of the previous audit?
The date of the previous audit was January 11th of 2016.
Okay,
So we're within the window, correct?
correct.
Okay, so let's go down to summary by category. HACCP score 100%. Do you see that?
I see the score, which omitted the concentrate room and also omitted from their hazard analysis the most critical to safety part of their process, yes.
We understand that the concentrate room is not considered as part of these NSF audits, but we are talking about the culture of the company, are we not?
Well, that's part of the problem here. That is the problem here. They omitted the concentrate room because they wanted to keep it secret, and they did not show their own quality their own quality people, the people they designated and held accountable for quality, their own employees. They did not show them the concentrate room and did not include it in their hazard analysis. That speaks to the culture, which is a failure, absolute failure.
Sure, but the auditors looked at all of the documentation that was available, talked to the qualified individuals, looked at the HACCP meetings, everything that you talked about previously, and despite not knowing about the concentrate room, taking everything else into account, gave them 100%. Is that accurate?
Because they were not aware of the entire process, and the entire the documentation was incorrect because it wasn't complete. They didn't know that. They did not know that.
We looked at a document earlier where they did identify errors in the documentation, didn't we? Isn't that the audit that we looked at earlier said that the flow chart was incorrect?
Sure.
So
These
they're
audits
analyzing these documents, aren't they?
Yeah, most of these NSF audits are more document-oriented than on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
There are different types of audits. This particular type of audit by NSF is more focused on documentation.
And point being, NSF was giving a critical eye to this HACCP documentation. That's how you end up with an audit where they're saying that your documentation is not up to date because they're looking at it, correct?
They were looking at an incomplete and incorrect set of documentation because other information was withheld from them intentionally.
So let's go forward to 2017, 46. And Robin, if we could go to summary of category again. This is a March 2nd, 2017 audit. Once again, we have a total score of 95.5% with a HACCP score of 94.1. And without getting into the common refrain about the concentrate room, overall, this would be passing for Costco, yeah?
It would be, but if Costco were to look at these findings by the auditor, they would see exactly why the deficiency is here, why they're 94.1 and not 100%, because they don't have a qualified individual for HACCP. And it was repeated from 2014 all the way through to 2019, when 6 days before the audit, Blaine Jones got certified.
Sure, so what happens when NSF determines that something like that needs to be corrected?
Then there is a corrective action
Can
set.
we go to 48, Robin?
And the company has to respond to the written corrective action and provide that back to NSF within a time period as designated.
Sure, let me see if this is the corrective action plan.
That's not it.
No, let's get to the right. Let me see here. Oh, 47, I think. Yeah. Okay, so this is a corrective action report, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and so let's zoom in on the HACCP section,
Yes.
Robin. Let's blow it up a little bit more. That's all I want to see. So now you were correctly stating that there was, and I'm quoting here for the specific non-compliance, no current staff that has completed formal HACCP training. That was the issue for the 94.1 score, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what did Blaine Jones do in response?
Nothing. This is closed, not approved. Because that's the status of this corrective action. Closed, not approved.
So you're unaware that Blaine actually went and got HACCP trained?
Yes, and the issue here is that main VP is HACCP trained now instead of relying on the QC director. Again, not approved. This corrective action has to be sent back to NSF. NSF did not approve what Real Water did in answer to the problem.
And yeah, and I understand that, but the point we're trying to make here is that the main VP of Real Water listened to the auditors and went out and tried to remedy the problem, correct?
He tried to correct this one deficiency, apparently, but it was not satisfactory according to the auditors.
So the deficiency was there is no current staff that has completed formal HACCP training. If I was reading that, or if you were reading that, wouldn't you assume that completing formal HACCP training would be a pretty good way to start?
Well, I don't know that I'm reading that in the comment here on preventive action plan, because they're not closing out and approving the corrective action. I don't know what he did. He said he's trained now. Is he certified? I don't know. But their message is it's not a quality process because he's not relying on the people he's holding accountable for quality. He's not enabling them to be HACCP certified. He's getting it himself, and he's the VP of operations.
Sure. Can we go to 50? Okay. Robin, same thing. Summary by category, please. Now, this is February 21st, 2019.
Yes.
Okay. We have a 100% HACCP score.
Yes, Mr. Jones got certified 6 days before the audit happened, yes.
Okay.
But he's still not the QC director. So.
Okay. Well, and I believe you previously testified title isn't necessarily the most important thing, right?
Yes, but that is correct, but performance is, and he wasn't acting as a quality professional. He wasn't enabling the organization to be quality-centric.
Thank you for that. All right, so we go back to this. We have now a series of audits, I think, that we've reviewed, where Real Water is getting feedback from a third-party independent company that they are, by and large, taking steps to be HACCP compliant, to be GMP compliant. Now, I'm asking you, is that the result of these audits?
I again say no, because they were misleading the auditor from the day one. They did not share with them the most critical to safety process, which is the hydrolysis process in the concentrate room that Mr. Jones kept secret from everybody,
So,
including the auditors.
so Ms. Hutt, what is it?
Dr. Hutt, please.
Excuse me. My apology. I really don't mean to do that, sincerely. If the culture of the company is all of these things, are you unwilling to say that the Real Water Company did anything meritorious in trying to operate their company?
I regard it as an operation out of control and flawed from the get-go in the sense that they were not transparent about their entire process. They were misleading auditors. They were misleading their entire organization. They did not have a culture of quality and a knowledge of what they needed to do to maintain it, and they failed.
They failed. HACCP 100%, plant sanitation 100%, employee practices 100%, pest control 100%. These are all things at the start of this cross you told me were important to you in forming your opinion about whether or not Real Water, as I'm using your term here, out of control.
They are not transparent by design. They intended to mislead their employees, and they intended to mislead these auditors by keeping the concentrate room secret.
And that has something to do with pest control, employee practices, and plant sanitation, or employees wearing jewelry.
In this particular audit, these are all snapshots, and I'd have to go to the notes that the auditor wrote because the auditor did identify some issues here.
Okay.
But again, the score is only one piece of the puzzle, and as a quality professional, you go to the notes, you read the auditors, what they actually saw.
Well,
And again,
and on the plus side, the jury will have these, so they can read the notes, come to their own conclusion. All right, so we're going to get you out of here, assuming that there aren't too many questions from the plaintiff's side and follow up. So as far as HACCP standards go, there is a disagreement between you and Real Water as to how far they should have gone to comply with the HACCP hazard analysis. That's fair, right?
well, there's no disagreement. The requirement is the full scope of the operation needs to be included in the hazard analysis.
Sure.
It wasn't.
HACCP standards include doing routine testing.
As declared, they also failed to declare their monitoring, which would include testing. Their monitoring plan was not included. That's why they didn't have a food safety plan.
That wasn't my question, Dr. Hutt. My question was, were they doing the routine monitoring that HACCP required?
No, they were not.
They were not doing the microbiological testing.
As evidenced by FDA in their Form 483, where they wrote up all the deficiencies that they saw, adulterated product, they said they were not doing their weekly microbiological testing, which was required.
Were you provided with any of the Western Laboratory lab reports?
I've seen lab reports
Sure.
that they have done, which are required by the bottled water regulations.
Required, yeah.
Yes, and they're targeted testing. I've seen some of those. But again, FDA identified they weren't doing all of their required testing. They identified it on the Form 483.
All of their required testing.
The microbiological testing, yes, where they would have found the coliforms that Ms. Kessler found in her bottled water.
And I don't want to get too far into coliform because I think we're getting too far afield, but there is a reason that coliform testing exists, right? Microbiological testing exists because you are testing for coliform, E. coli, things. These are the known hazards, right?
Well, they're known and expected.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
reasonably
you.
foreseeable hazards, yes.
Yes, and so that would be different than hydrazine.
That's true.
Okay, thank you. All right. Just checking my notes real quick, Dr. Hutt. Okay. You know what, Dr. Hutt, I think that's all I have for you. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kemp?
Let's see if we can get done in 2 minutes, okay? All right, Mr. Esposito suggested that Mr. Jones, despite getting sick with acute liver failure, did not have enough information in the middle of October 2020 to order recall because he didn't know about the hydrazine. Do you recall that question?
Yes.
Well, in addition to Mr. Jones himself getting acute liver failure, did he have additional information as of October 15th about other people getting problems?
Yes, he did.
Shane, can I have the exhibit? This is an answer that Real Water gave to the FDA. Is that correct?
Yes.
What exhibit number is this, Council?
It is, I think it's 33. Is that right? 33?
Yes.
33.
Thank you.
And in this answer, they say that they logged 25 to 50 calls, 12 to 15 cancellations. So we have 3 or 4 dozen people complaining about Real Water during this time period, correct?
That's correct.
And in addition to that, what did Mr. Randolph, the Vice President of Sales, say that he did?
Mr. Randolph begged Mr. Jones to conduct a recall in October of 2020.
Okay, so we have Mr. Jones getting sick with acute liver failure himself. We have dozens of customer complaints in October. And on top of that, we have the Vice President of Sales begging him on 2 different occasions to do a recall, correct?
Yes.
In your opinion, is that sufficient information to require a company to do a recall?
Yes. 25 to 30 calls within that 1 month time period is an outrageously huge red flag. Something is terribly wrong, needs to be investigated. In this case, the result would have been finding hydrazine.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hutt.
One question, Dr. Hutt. Shane, would you be so kind as to pull that back up for me? Do you have any understanding as to when the plaintiffs in this case got sick?
I've seen dates of their illness, yes.
Okay, so we were talking either sometime in 2018 or sometime in mid to, let's say, third quarter of 2020.
I've seen dates after October of
Sure.
2020, yes.
Okay, so these customers had this water in their possession by and large before the October 15th through November 15th period that's referenced on this. Would you agree?
In all likelihood, yes. I have no knowledge specifically, though, no.
Okay. So the point that we are now contesting that a recall should have happened, this was done. This would have happened.
Well, there's evidence prior, as we've gone through in detail, that these types of complaints were being received by Real Water continuously from at least 2013 about gasoline smells, et cetera, which were not investigated. So here's a huge crunch of a huge hands full of complaints about the same issue coming forward during a very short time period. Now, again, the red flag started going up way before October
the-
15th.
With the dirt and the styrofoam and the,
No,
Yeah.
with the sour stomach, sour tasting in my stomach, the gasoline smell,
Sure.
the off smells, all that was indicative of a chemical which was never investigated by Real Water to find what it was, and they simply gave customers more Real Water.
a chemical that wasn't known at all to the bottled water industry that it could potentially be a hazard.
That's not important because they could have sent it out to somebody, say, I have an unknown, please figure out what it is. And that would have come back as hydrazine in a heartbeat if they'd done a mass spec analysis. And that would have been routine as part of a non-targeted testing for the product, the unknown.
Non-targeted.
Correct, non-targeted. Yes, because then you're saying, I don't know, I'm not trying to find a pesticide which is a part of a regulatory requirement directed by FDA, so I have to do that. And that's what Real Water did. They did the targeted testing that was compliant with regulations, yes, and they found no pesticides, et cetera, which were declared, even the method is declared by FDA in their regulations. They did that, but what they weren't doing is following up on the unknown, non-targeted testing, saying, I've got something really bad in my water, it's making people sick, and they're complaining about it, and I'm gonna do nothing about it. That's what they did. But they could have given that to a laboratory, and they could have said, find out for me. They could have done that in 2013, 2014, any time period since I started seeing these complaints.
Sure.
They didn't. They just didn't. It would have been very simple, cheap, and it would have shown hydrazine.
Because all of the targeted testing that you say they were doing, they were supposed to be doing, didn't yield the evidence of a chemical that nobody in the bottled water industry knew anything about.
Because that targeted testing was very specific for organophosphate chemicals, pesticides, et cetera, heavy metals, and that targeted testing would never show anything other than what it was testing for. That's why it's targeted.
Sure. For organic constituents, heavy metals, VOCs. As a matter of fact, I think it's called a toxic registry, right? Most of these organizations, even regulations, have an extensive list of things to test for because that's what they know the risks are.
Incorrect, because they're testing exactly what is required in FDA's regulations for bottled water. That's what the testing that Real Water did do, but that's not non-targeted. I've got an unknown problem, smells like gasoline, my customers are complaining, please somebody figure it out. mass spec analysis would have figured that out very quickly.
Yeah, because hindsight is 20/20, correct? Sure. Thank you, Doctor.
Doctor, one last question. Mr. Esposito just suggested to you that if a recall had taken place on October 15th, it wouldn't have made a difference to any of the plaintiffs. Recall his question?
I do recall.
Shane, can I have the dates, please? Okay. So, November 16th, that's Cheryl Nally. How long is that after October 15th?
A month plus,
And Mr. Alvera, that's November 6th. How long is that after?
about 3 weeks.
And Miss Van Buren, Land Van Buren, that's November 18th. How long is that after?
That's over a month.
Okay. And Mr. Mano, that's November 10th. How long is that after?
It's at least 3 weeks.
Okay. And Mr. Nigel Davis Richard, what day is he getting sick?
It's about a month.
Nicole Chang.
Less than a month, but close to it.
Okay. And then we have Vanya Diaz.
Again, over a month, or about a month.
And skipping over to, well, that's enough. So basically, and I didn't count it, it was 8 or 9 people in this case that they had their addresses because they were making home delivery to them. They had their phone number. They had email contacts. And so do you give any credence to Mr. Esposito's suggestion that if a recall had been done on October 15th, that all of these people would have got sick anyway?
No, they would not have gotten sick. And further, there was so much indication
Objection, Your Honor.
prior.
she's way beyond the scope of the testimony of this claim. She's not a doctor. She can't contest whether or not somebody would have gotten sick off the real water.
Doctor.
I'll overrule.
As to the timing, not
Wait,
as to
wait.
the medical diagnosis.
Overrule.
Okay, doctor, assuming that Real Water is conceding that all these people got acute liver failure, with the exception of Strong and Gaseous, is it your opinion that a recall would have been effective?
A recall would have prevented them from getting sick in October of 2020.
Okay, and why is that?
Because it would have withdrawn their exposure to the product that was providing hydrazine to them that
Thank
they
you, Doctor.
continued to drink.
All right, anything else? We got one question we need to approach. Any other questions with the jury? Somebody?
I agree with you, Larry.
I agree with 100% that it does give you an insight as to what one panel is. Okay. All right. Ma'am,
Yes,
doctor, thank you.
thank you, Your Honor.
All right, you may be released. And we did have one question from panel member number 6, and sir, I just decided not to ask that question for this specific witness. But I don't want to discourage you from asking any other questions. Okay, so we're done for today. Is that correct, everyone?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
All
What time
right,
we starting tomorrow, Yon?
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock.
9 o'clock. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you're admonished not to converse amongst yourselves or with anyone else on any subject matter connected with this trial, or to read, watch, or listen to any report of or commentary on the trial by any persons connected with this case, or by any medium of information, including without limitations, to newspaper, television, radio, social media. Last but not least, do not form or express any opinion on any subject matter connected with this trial until the cause is finally submitted to you. And tomorrow, 9 o'clock.
All right, support to adjourn.
Your Honor, could I? Yep, it's totally set. Could I show that question to Mr. Parker briefly?
Yes, you can.
He can be part of that.
You can go off the record.
Tyler Watson, Brad Johnson, and Eric Friedman for the defendant, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. And this is more cautionary than anything.
I understand, Your Honor.
But Mr. Kemp, go ahead.
Your Honor, we've stipulated that defense counsel could take a picture of the jury question from Mr. McKinley, juror number 6, provided that he sends a copy of the picture to plaintiff's counsel, so we both have it.
And Your Honor, we would just request that the picture remain attorney's eyes only. That
Absolutely.
There's no public disclosure or.
Attorney's eyes and client's eyes.
Fair enough.
All right, great.
Based on that, we'll stipulate it.
Okay, so stipulated. All right. Just don't want that to come down the road somewhere else.
Good point, Your Honor.
I always try to be very careful.